More rumors have circulated about the PlayStation 4.5 4K, or now, as it's being called, the PlayStation Neo. What do we know, and why?
Newsboy Andrew, go.
Hey, so Giant Bomb obtained some documents for developers that are working with this thing. The codename for it is Neo, and it's really interesting in that Sony is very careful to not split the player base. So basically, according to these documents, Sony really wants people to... Every game will have a Neo mode, which in other words, a 4K mode, or a base mode where it can run on a normal PS4. The idea being that if you have a PS4, you buy games off a shelf the same way you would otherwise. There's still only one game available in the PSN store. Everything's the same, but depending on which system you have, you can get more out of it, basically.
Sure. So the demand for backwards compatibility is so great, they built a second system so the PlayStation 4 can be backwards compatible with itself.
Yeah.
I mean, I like it.
Marty and I were talking about this earlier. Our rough guess would be that you buy a game, it's just one disc in the store. If you buy whatever, The Last of Us 2, it's going to be on shelves.
There's not going to be two SKUs. There's not going to be two prices.
Right. But maybe when you put it in on the Neo, you can download like a 4K texture pack, or there's some kind of free component from the store that upgrades it to the new mode.
And what it scales to your hardware, which if you've ever played a PC game,
you just literally go into the options menu and go to
settings.
Ultra.
Yeah, sure. And maybe it's grayed out if you can't run it.
Yeah, and they very much said that, well, according to these, again, documents, rumored reports, that there's not going to be exclusive features. So it's not going to be like, oh, The Last of Us 2 on the PS Neo.
You can take off your shirt.
You can take off your shirt. No, that shirt's staying on both.
Yeah.
Or
sorry.
it's just
unless
off
it's
both.
You can. So hopefully that you can take your shirt off in The Last of Us 2.
And then also the price wasn't in this document, but they said everything they've heard has been $399, which is really interesting. So that leads. There's a couple things to talk about, and one of them is I feel like the general response has been anger.
Yeah.
A majority of it has been anger because a lot of people feel like this is anti-early adopters or anti the 40 million people who have supported and made the PS4 one of the fastest selling consoles of all time.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I think a big part of that is because we're reading these stories and writing these stories and having these conversations in places where people probably already own a PS4, right? This isn't really for the swing for the fences New York Times crowd at E3 when they're just like, they reach out with all over the world sort of being like we have our base, we get that, we know who we're preaching to the choir over here, but to get like we've talked about them on the show before, like the sort of tech dads and stuff like that, people who are sort of kind of on the outside of like hardcore gaming, but they want the coolest thing. Anyone reading the story, anyone listening to the show, I'm guessing a large majority of people listening to the show own a PlayStation console already, most likely a PS4. You're probably reading this and going like, this sucks. I think this is like, it's hard to understand that this might not necessarily be for you.
Okay, so looping back to that, of those people, how many of them have 4K TVs? I don't have a 4K
Very
TV.
few.
Do you guys have? None of you guys.
I think
have.
like
No,
three people on our side of the office have 4K TVs.
Well, I think it's like a cart leading the horse kind of thing.
And all three of them are micro.
I mean, it's future proofing, you know.
Yeah.
It's understanding that now if you go to Best Buy and you're like, I'd like to buy a nice brand new TV, that TV is probably going to be 4K.
Well, I'll reverse the question. When was the last time you guys bought a TV?
When I moved to San Francisco.
Yeah.
I've had it was 7 years, 8 years. Like,
so yeah, we're all due.
I mean, I don't think it's, for me, what I like about it is that it's theoretically, if all the PS4 games just work, if they're not splitting the player base, it's extending the generation, meaning, if you want to be in the bleeding edge, it does suck. If if you're going to have to fork out another $400 like to stay on the bleeding edge, that's hard. But at the same time, like, if 4 years from now we're not getting a PS5 because the Neo is out and it's running better games and my old PS4 games still work, maybe that's a good thing.
I think you're nuts if you think this is delaying anything about a PS5. I don't think this is going to change anything about when this generation ends.
Sure.
I think this is just sort of a shift or a small evolution halfway through. And I agree with you. Like, I'm not mad at this. I don't even know if I'm going to get one. If I don't have a 4K TV, do I really care about this? Like, maybe I'll eventually get one. I'm totally fine with it until the moment a game comes out that is optimized for the PlayStation Neo and not my PS4, and when I am penalized, because I'm totally fine if a game runs just like Uncharted's probably going to run, or just like Bloodborne runs, but looks a little bit better on the Neo. I'm totally fine.
You guys made the joke about the PS4.5 exclusive features, right? And how there won't be any taking off the shirt and stuff like that. They say there won't be any, like taking off your shirt, but there will be. Like there will just be inherently differences in those games. It's also like, this is a weird little anecdote, but when I used to work for GameSpy, which is like it was like a sort of like a sister company to IGN or like a little baby IGN, mostly focused on PC gaming. It's like how I got in the industry. We had console channels on GameSpy, and we would get screenshots sent over from developers all the time that were basically their games running in the highest definition possible on PC, and they'd be like, here's our Xbox 360 screenshots, and we'd send them back and be like, not true.
Yeah.
That's physically impossible. That's not how that works. And they'd be like, no, we swear. And we're like, sorry, we're not running your screenshots on our site. You're getting into an area where a few years from now, you get a trailer or a batch of screens on a game, and you're like, oh, coming to PS4. Cool. Got it.
Yeah.
But what are you looking at?
I mean, look at the trickle down from like the Watch Dogs reveal to Watch Dogs on PS4 in action to what Watch Dogs look like on last gen.
Or running on high-end PCs, too. Like, even on the highest-end PC, we're already dealing with bull shots and bull videos.
And that's where the thing that confuses me, or not confuses me, but, like, the anger is surprising to me, I guess, because I don't know. I'm with you. I don't know that I will necessarily buy this. But the weird thing for me is, so Jose just reviewed Hyrule Warriors Legends on 3DS.
Yeah.
And it runs on a new 3DS or a regular 3DS. On new 3DS, it runs pretty well. On a regular 3DS, it, like, chugs, and it's awful. And... you look at Black Ops 3 on 360 PS3 versus PS4, where there's like nothing there, and they replaced all the tech stuff with walking.
You actually can't run that Hyrule Warriors game in 3D on the old 3DS.
Yeah.
Which
And
is
I guess that's what I don't like. I hope we don't get to that point where they're like, oh, it technically still runs, but it's like awful.
Yeah.
Like that's where if it gets to that point, then I agree with outrage, and it's like I get it because then you're forced into buying the new one.
So the largest argument I hear against this thing, and again, I'm going to side with Marty in that I'm kind of middle of the road on it. I'm sort of apathetic. Like if it gets to a point, like I'm a bad measures of success for something like this because I buy every console at launch. I buy everything at launch. I get excited for things like I love all that hubbaloo and all that garbage that comes around.
Hubbaloo?
Hubbaloo?
Hullabaloo.
Okay.
It's a Hebrew bread.
Hummus bubblegum platter?
So I'm down to trade in my PS4.
Yeah.
Like I will totally, and that's one thing that I think everyone's leaving out here is that this will also, like this will broaden the market because if you look at cameras or Apple products, there is very much that early adopter market which they acknowledge. They know that's a thing, and people will always be trading in their still technically new thing for the newest thing.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that new thing is suddenly refurbished and it's available for
so what I'm saying is that the apprehension towards that is stemming 100% from the fact that historically this has never been a thing we've had to do in console gaming. You mentioned products where we're like used to that by now, right? Like you get a new phone every 2 years and it's no big deal. Your PC, you're constantly upgrading if you actually care about that kind of stuff. But consoles are like, hey man, when I bought a console, you told me there's going to be a 7-year life cycle or a 10-year life cycle.
And that's the advantage
which
over
is
PC.
Specifically something that Sony has been touting for the longest time. Like their marketing campaign behind the PS2 and the PS3 was like, these are the decade-long consoles. So to kind of pull that rug out from under people, I kind of understand why they're upset.
It's also a weird thing where like 37 million PS4s have been sold in 2.5 years. Like pretty much no matter what, I would be stunned if ever PS Neo hits that, right? Like I think no matter what, there will always be more core PS4s out there than Neo. So it's like even best case scenario, like you're gonna have more people with the older hardware than the newer hardware.
So my thing is like, what is this? If this was coming from so like Nintendo's launching a new console this year, right? Why are they doing it? Because the Wii U failed.
Yeah.
Why would Sony launch a new console when it's
fathom why they're doing it?
Like it doesn't make any sense to me outside of being like we are strategically going for the pinnacle of tech people, gamers who want the best looking things.
And also
you don't sell 40 million consoles and then go like, we're hurting.
I think VR is the big push for it because theoretically, I mean, we don't know obviously, but like the processor box that you're essentially paying for when you buy a PSVR, I guess the long-term plan would be if everyone's buying PS Neos from this point forward, and if they're that much more powerful, maybe down the road they can sell a PSVR for like $150, where you're literally just buying the headset and the console itself is capable of running VR games.
It just feels like you're splitting the conversation into Sony pieces by being like, here's this game on PS4, here's this game on PS4 VR, here's this game on PS4.5 VR.
Also, like when they show. it's going to be weird if they show God of War 4 at E3.
Yep.
Is it going to be running on the Neo? Is it going to be
That's what
running?
I'm
Is it
saying.
going to look like what it's going to look like?
Like,
at
what are we
home?
looking at? Like, 'cause
Yeah.
if you see that and they're like available for pre-order today and you pre-order it, like, what are you getting at that point?
Also, are they like getting rid of? We were talking about this earlier. Are they getting rid of that excitement of what a game looks like at the start of a generation compared to what that developer could do at the end? Like Uncharted 1 compared to The Last of Us.
Yeah.
Or like what like a launch PS2 game like Kessen or The Bouncer looked like compared to like Kingdom Hearts 2 or Okami or God of War 2.
They're strengths that are born from limitation.
Yeah.
They're
Yes.
people who their art is good because of the restrictions that were around it, and they have to think creatively as opposed to like being able to make whatever. I mean, I don't know. Like, I think it's a lot of the sky is falling. I hate Sony. They screwed me over.
Yeah.
Thinking right now, we don't know what this is. Like, honestly, like
No.
I think Sony this generation especially has not made a misstep yet. I think as of right now, they're doing really well and they're being smart about what they're doing and they're listening to fans. So I would hope.
What about was Shuhei hit that deer with his car? It's horrible.
It's a horrible
tragic.
accident.
No, so there was this NeoGAF thread the other day about Nintendo DS games running in HD through an emulator, and they're fascinating because once you remove all the hardware limitations of the DS, which was just like Vaseline smeared, incredibly low res, you started seeing that you're like, oh my god, this game had like 3D polygon character design and not sprites, and you thought they were all sprites because you're playing them on a 2.5-inch screen.
Yeah.
I don't really think there's anything at play with the PS4 where you're going to lift the veil and all of a sudden it's going to be like, oh, there was a beautiful game under there the whole time.
No, it's going to be like more grass.
Yeah.
Like less jagged edges.
Yeah.
It's like
more
we're
grass.
2.5 years
I
in the
wanna see that in the
generation,
box.
and there's already gorgeous. Like, I'm not playing Bloodborne or Ratchet and Clank or seeing Uncharted and being like, man, I wish this looked better. It's like, no, that looks totally fine with me.
Dream bigger,
I think
guess.
Bloodborne should have more grass. I think there's not enough grass in that game.
That's gonna be real sad, dead grass.
I can't wait to see how they message this. If this is going to be announced at E3, it's also like, who is going to buy a console between E3 and November if they announce this thing in June?
Also, like we're looking
Yeah.
at this being called PlayStation 4K, PlayStation 4.5, PlayStation Neo. What if it's just PlayStation 4 Slim? Like, what if they just kind of like they put
And
all
then
this
just
stuff,
phase out what we have now?
It's I mean, it's got all this stuff. Like, if they are sticking to their word and being like, okay, the bells and whistles, the 4K stuff is future proofing. It is bridging a gap between like another hardware generation, which is just displays and VR.
Yeah. And maybe it's just called the PlayStation 4. I mean, look at what the iPad did.
Exactly.
Where one
Yeah.
day they
The
were
new
just
iPad.
like, this is the iPad.
Yep.
And then we're quietly phasing out all the old models.
And it's even, I mean, that happens now. Like, I think we, like, throughout the life cycle of a generation, you slowly see bigger hard drives and everything else. Or then you even see, like, the Xbox 360 had, like, different chipsets, like, during all the Red Ring stuff. Like, they didn't make a big public campaign after it, out of it. But
Or they'll remove
the
ports.
hardcore users, like, looked for, like, oh, you want to buy one that says Jesper on the back because that one went Red Ring because it's a better...
They'll add a remove ports on a console without even make a big stinking
Yeah, I mean, there were
it's
like
just-
there were 3 PlayStation 1s. you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
It was like, oh, I want to use a mod chip or whatever and play burn games.
I will be fascinated to
There's
see...
that weird Wii that doesn't play GameCube games.
Oh,
or
the
whatever.
Canadian
Like,
one,
what?
yeah. I'm super curious to see what this is and how they message it.
Because everything they're messaging so far for the past 3 years has been so on point. It's been
know.
so good, and they haven't missed a single punch
yeah,
yet.
well, they
and so
also haven't messaged this
No,
yet.
totally.
We're
Yeah.
all completely reacting to
various
leaks and
reports
rumors,
that
so
sometimes conflict each other and sometimes
So
don't.
I feel like this is something that whether it's happening soon or whether it's even happening at all, which it really feels like it's happening.
It's happening,
It's
yeah.
happening. This has to be messaged at E3 in some way.
Definitely.
And they have to handle it incredibly carefully because that's a room full of people who already own a PS4. Who are clapping, waiting for the next big thing.
What if you bring out a celebrity to message it, like Fergie?
like TV
Or Hoop
Shaun
Dog.
White
Wait,
or
who's
Rappy
gone?
Drums?
Dog?
Trump.
E3, the best celebrities in the world are back.
wow.